Welcome everybody to this London Futurist Hangout on Air on an update on possibilities to reverse aging. The reversal of aging or slowing down of aging would have big repercussions for society. And as people interested in the future, we want to think ahead. Is it likely that people will live longer and healthier? If so, that's going to have a big impact on pensions, savings for the future. It's going to have a big impact on planning for healthcare, because the older people are, in general, the more healthcare they consume, the more share of the national healthcare resources go their way. And if it's also the case that we can be confident we won't just live for maybe 70 or 80 years, but if there's a significant chance we might live to, say, 120, that's going to impact how we live our lives as well. So for all these reasons, it's important to think ahead and understand, is it likely that that future is going to come about? Or will it just be that we've already reached the peak of health and medicine, and that medicine won't be doing much more to extend lifespan further? So in this panel, we have 5 experts, either in the field of science or in the field of advocacy, or in many cases from both fields. And the question I'm going to be putting to them over the next hour or so is, what have you learned in the last year or so that you didn't know before? What are the insights that you'd like to share that weren't clear before, but now you appreciate? Whether it's insights about the science of aging, the effectiveness of various therapies and interventions, whether it's something to do with general social feedback on these ideas, whether it's something to do with the economic arguments, or whether it's something to do with how we should be having this conversation more generally. How has our understanding of the advocacy improved? So let's introduce the panelists. Let's roughly go from west to east. I'd like to start by introducing Johnny Adams, who is in California. Johnny, just say a few words about yourself and what you have learned.
Briefly. Well, thank you, David, and hello, futurists around the world. I am a futurist, and of course, I subscribe to news feeds and websites, and the London Futurists website resonates with me, but just a little brief background. Rather than political activism, advocacy, publicity, and basic science and animal research, most of my actions are sharply focused on getting all of us there into the future. And I do that by creating or helping others create interventions to age-related decline so we can have many more years of healthy living. And I think that's probably enough of a brief introduction for now. I can talk about my many reasons for my own optimism and why I see in our broad community on many fronts we're getting traction, and much more is being done for success to create interventions for aging in the future, and only a few frustrations. So thank you.
Could you mention something that you've seen in the last 12, 18 months that you think deserves more attention?
I'm just seeing multiple windows about, and I'm going to try and keep this answer brief, but I have a lot to say. But about 18 months ago, I was thinking, well, everything's moving at a slow glacial pace. So I thought, okay, this is what I do. Stay true to course, cure aging or die trying. You know, if nothing else, it's also damn interesting. But about a year and a half ago, things started accelerating on multiple fronts. And, you know, 2 very broad categories. One is multiple initiatives on different levels. And the others, I started seeing research results, tangible results, lab work, as well as subjective reports of interventions. And, you know, I have about 5 or 6 different categories. And, you know, if you get me started, I'll talk about all of them. I have the feeling that I've exceeded my introduction
Well, I'd still like
time, but I can keep rolling now or later if you like.
I'd still like one specific piece from you, whether it's lab work, is it animal lab work or human lab work?
Well, I focus almost exclusively on humans. And I mean, mice are nice and basic research is important. There's so many just major conferences, people like Jim Kirkland at Mayo, Nir Barzilai, the TAME study, different high level, we'll call it high level, but the University of California, Irvine stem cell study for frailty, where the target is frailty. That's kind of a big deal. And Kirkland talking about one intervention to intervene in multiple diseases. And at these, Gerontological Society of America, International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics, they're starting to take on and talk about aging interventions rather than just basic research or research for diseases. Liz Parrish's outstanding results. I watched a video from her yesterday and it's kind of exciting. Can't wait to hear from her, the lab work and her subjective impressions. I'll just name some initiatives. I could talk more about them. Longevity, Rescue Elders, Deep Knowledge Ventures with Dmitry Kaminsky, and finally, new avenues for people like myself, self-directed age management researchers or biohackers or self-selected lab rats who choose under expert physician guidance to try different interventions on ourselves safely, cautiously, and other initiatives like that are developing. And later, if you want, I can name a few. I think I've probably said enough for now.
Many thanks. So I would like to introduce Liz Parrish, who I believe is in Seattle today. Liz, for those who maybe don't know you, say a few things about yourself and share some of your thoughts as to what's changing in this field.
Okay, I want to thank you for having me. My name's Liz Parrish. I'm the CEO of a company called BioViva. We're a translational engine. This next year, and well, actually this year in 2018, we'll start to run the data of what happens with patients when they take gene therapy to treat biological aging. So we're very excited about our advances and what we're doing. But you wanted to know what are the great advances of the last year, right? So we saw a lot of advances in gene therapy. So gene therapy is our area, so that's what we're going to talk about. One of the most exciting things, of course, came out of the Cas CRISPR system. So DCAS system gives us the ability to turn genes on and off that are already in our genome. So this is pretty exciting technology. Instead of inserting a gene, we might be able to modulate the genes in our system, and it gets us a little bit closer to doing that. We also saw the advances of the Cas system controlling one letter at a time. So one letter within the gene, fixing mutations. That's pretty exciting. But as far as what we saw in trials, we kind of had our mind blown, and this is what we hope to see. We have over 2,000 people now that have AAV gene therapy in their bodies. I'm one of them, very happy to say. We're seeing a very good safety profile. We're seeing the control of disease. We're seeing inherited blindness be cured in one case, and that's going to expand into a myriad of other inherited blindness conditions. We saw the first control of hemophilia B, which is very exciting. And not only did we see control in that, but compared to therapies that were done over 10 years ago, we're seeing up to 120 times less gene therapy needed to control those diseases. So that's super exciting. What else did we see? We saw the beginning of a phase 1 safety trial for Parkinson's disease. And, people who know me know that I'm in here looking for cures for kids. The treatment that will treat Parkinson's disease may also treat pediatric neurotransmitter disease. So that's delivering on the future for both the young and the old, which makes me really excited. Let me see, what else did we see? We saw the Hurlitz and non-Hurlitz disease potentially be treated. That was the butterfly skin disease with the ex vivo gene therapy. Super exciting there. These kids usually don't live past infancy, and this gives us a lot of insight on how we can actually treat other skin diseases in an aging population. So that's super exciting.
And these are all from gene therapies of one form or another, such as the AAV?
Gene therapies. These are all gene therapies. Talons came in and made their big debut again with CAR T cells to treat cancer.
So Talons is a possible alternative to CRISPR. So CRISPR is one way of editing, and the Talons is a different way of editing. Is that right?
Yeah, there's zinc nuclease fingers, and then there's Talons, and then there's CRISPR. So these are the Talons are one of the older forms of editors. The great thing about the CRISPR-Cas system is that it's cheaper and more effective on a larger amount of cells in less amount of time. But these very succinct Talon can actually be used ex vivo, meaning they bring the cells out of the body, they modulate the T cells, and then they send them back in to treat cancer. And we're actually seeing that work. We're in phase 1 clinical trials with that. And then again, CRISPR is kicking butt on cancer. As a matter of fact, I believe that China right now has 9 clinical trials coming up to tackle cancer with also T cells, and that's CRISPR going in and editing those cells and putting them back in the body, and then the body's target cancer and eradicate it. So that's kind of like a really quick synopsis on some of the great things that is happening with gene therapy right now, and we're really excited about that.
And the DCAS is, you said, different mechanisms. It's not actually editing the DNA, but it's editing the epigenetics and turning on or off of genes. So the genes are still there, but they are either enabled or disabled. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And so, right now what we do is we find a target gene and we insert it into the cell and we upregulate its protein. But this gives us the opportunity to start affecting the epigenetics succinctly at the level of the gene we want to turn on. So let's give an example. One of the gene therapies that I did was a telomerase-inducing gene therapy. So telomeres are the caps at the ends of your chromosomes, and as we get older, they get shorter and shorter. So that's correlated with the diseases of aging, okay? Our caps of our telomeres are short, and we have epigenetic instability as that happens. So if we did a gene therapy right now, like I had done on me, we actually inserted, it's called HTERT. It's a gene that then creates telomerase and lengthens the caps of the telomeres. But we actually have HTERT in every one of our cells. It's just not turned on. It's epigenetically turned off. So we could go in potentially with this system and just turn on that one gene. In the past, whenever we tried to affect epigenetics, it would turn on a myriad of genes. It would kind of just unfurl an area. But now we have the ability to potentially exact the science, and in the next few years, just turn one gene on or one gene off.
Okay, one more question for you, Liz, before I move on to my eastward journey around the world. You mentioned that some of the therapies needed is less substance than before, I think you said. And that's significant in terms of cost, because it's quite expensive still to make these systems, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's one of the things our company is really excited about. As we ramp up manufacturing this year, we're very excited about finding serotypes or synthetic delivery methods that mean that you need to use less of the product. So gene therapy is cost prohibitive for most people right now. It can range between $40,000 and over $1 million just to manufacture. So in order to get those prices down, if we have serotypes, meaning the capsid that actually transfects, has a better job at transfecting more cells get affected by the gene of choice, then we have a large benefit to actually drive down the cost of the product. So there's two ways to do it: building up manufacturing, creating new IP that makes it less expensive to build, and then the other side is finding better delivery methods that take less of the product. And in there lies cost-effective, affordable gene therapy.
Fascinating. I'd like to bring in Sven from Belgium. Sven, if you'd like to say a little bit about yourself and your role, and pick out one or two things that are particularly interesting from your perspective.
Okay, so 10 years ago, I was a co-founder of HEALS, the Healthy Life Extension Society in Belgium. And one thing I do for this organization every month is compiling the scientific news of what has happened last month. And one thing I can see really there is the constant progress. And some people may have the misbelief that in science we make these types of huge jumps where, you know, we go from 0 to 1. But that's not generally the case. Generally, the way it works is we take step by step. And it's really encouraging to me to see every single month how many different fields where steps have been taken towards the goal of better understanding aging and hence curing aging. I was just thinking about things that have happened in the last few years, major progress. And I have identified 4 things that are really exciting. Mm-hmm. Liz has done an excellent job in introducing one of them, and that's our gene editing methods, the CRISPR-Cas and the TALENs. But other than the gene editing, we also have major advances in the stem cell field, particularly in the induced pluripotent stem cell field. We also had a better measurement of aging, for example, the Horvath clock, which based on several epigenetic markers, we can predict how old a person is. And then another field, and that's why I want to go a little bit further in at this moment, is the cell senescence. So we have known for many years that there are some things called senescent cells, cells that have stopped dividing and actually start to secrete toxic factors to the body, including inflammatory markers. And in 2011, if I get it right, there was a paper in Nature where they used a genetic method to eliminate these cells, and they saw a huge improvement in the health of the mice. And then in 2016, if I get it right, we did that study, but this time in healthy mouse, because the first study was in accelerated aging mouse. And then, that kind of confirmed that senescent cells are really important in aging. But these types of methods are basically currently impossible to put into a human. We don't have any therapy that is at this moment succeeding in modifying every single cell in a human body genetically and putting this type of suicide switch in the cells that destroys them when they would get senescent.
Is that what happens with mice, that every single cell in the body is changed with this switch?
Well, yes, but that was because you genetically engineer the mice before they are born. Yes. You do it on the embryo, on the single cell, and then actually, well, it's even more complex than that. But I think I'm not going to go into the detail. But you basically engineer it so that when from the beginning has the right gene in every cell, and you can do that in an adult organism. So that's a problem. But then in recent years, and that's the advance I wanted to come to when you ask, what in the last year or 18 months, is that we start to see more and more small molecules, senolytics they are called, that can stimulate these senescent cells to die. And one major advance, I think, was done by Peter de Keyser last year, and that was a FOXO4 DRI, which is a small peptide.
Just say some of that again a bit more slowly. I'm not sure everybody caught. I mean, you talked about small molecule senolytics, then you gave some actual names.
Yes, so FOXO4 DRI is a small peptide, and it was developed by Peter de Keyser from the Netherlands. And so when he gave this molecule to mice, it killed the senescent cells in the mice, and it greatly improved their health.
And these were so-called normal mice. They hadn't been genetically engineered in the first place. Is that right?
I think I would have to check the paper for that again, but I think he did it definitely in normal mice as well. But I think he also, if I remember correctly, yes, he used irradiated mouse so that they accumulated more senescent cells. Okay. But he's definitely at this moment testing it in normal mice and seeing what it does with normal aging, and that's really exciting.
Right. And so how long do you think it's going to be before there might be something that can be available on the market for people to take based on this small molecule senolytics? Is this something we could look forward to in 10 years or in 3 years, or is it too difficult to estimate?
Well, predicting the future is never easy. The case is that someone is already taking it, at least one person, who just bought it from a Chinese company that makes it. So, you know, and he reports health benefits on his own website. But legally, the question, when will it legally hit the market? Well, the first thing they are going to do it is to have it approved for specific diseases. And I think that could probably go relatively quick. I mean, you know, once we have the mouse data, you know, in a few years, like 2-3 years, we will have definitely probably human trials, and then, you know, so in a few years from now, maybe 5, something like that, we could start to see the molecule being used in the clinic, maybe for specific diseases. But using it as an anti-aging cure is, of course, the question is, you know, whenever is the FDA going to accept aging as a thing that is open for medical treatment? And that's a whole other question that is not related to science, but more to advocacy.
We might come and talk about that shortly. Let's at this stage introduce Ilya Stambler, I think in Israel. Ilya, maybe you say a few words to introduce yourself and also pick out the 1 or 2 points that you have seen in the last year or so as changes in this field.
I'm trying to be involved on both the scientific side and the advocacy side. Last year I published a few academic papers, so this book on longevity promotion.
Just show that a bit more slowly, that was a bit too quick.
Yeah, that's the one. Longevity Promotion Multidisciplinary Perspectives, which is trying to combine both scientific and advocacy perspectives, as I am myself. And I'm also an activist. I'm a chair of the Israeli nonprofit Israel Longevity Alliance. I'm also involved in international advocacy as an outreach coordinator of the International Society on Aging and Disease. So basically what I've seen in the last year, and now my perspective is a bit different from the one I had even last year. I think I'm a bit more sober than the last year. I mean, the science is advancing, there's no doubt about it. You can just look at my Facebook feed, you'll see 5 breakthroughs at least every day. So there is a lot of sideways expansion. Sven and Liz mentioned some of them. I would also mention the stronger focus that I see on whole body regulation, on the regulatory process. Let's say the work, very beautiful work of Dong-Shen Kai from Albert Einstein College on the reparation of hypothalamus by stem cell implantation, which shows the importance of a whole body regulation rather than trying to reduce aging to cellular or molecular processes. But on the other hand, I see that we are not doing so good. You know, in terms of actual people's life extension, we are doing so good. We see that the actual life expectancy is declining in the United States 3 years in a row. We see that the life expectancy is stagnating in the United Kingdom. All over the world, the gains in life expectancy are reducing compared even to the 50s. So if we are interested in actual human life extension, not just in beautiful articles and shiny gadgets, we are actually regressing, not progressing. So there are actual things that we can do even in terms of basic healthcare, basic public health, reducing health inequality. Yes, we have to advance science. Yes, we have to accelerate the development of science, but at the same time, not forget the general societal problems that slow our progress toward life extension. That's my perspective. That's how it's changed in the last year.
But it's not the science that's to blame for the decline in life expectancy. It's more general social trends, depression, people becoming addicted to the wrong kinds of drugs, not to any of the drugs we've been speaking about so far, getting suicidal and.
Right, but the science is definitely not helping to overcome this trend. So we definitely should work in both directions, both improving public health and science. Hopefully they'll synergize and help each other. But right now, science is lagging and not helping us in actual life extension.
Can I ask you a little bit more about the work you mentioned from the Albert Einstein College, the work on hypothalamus.
Sorry.
Hypothalamus, yes, there's lots of things that sound very similar. Hypothalamus, and you saying that it's an approach to aging. It doesn't look at the cells all over the body. It looks at one particular mechanism. So what are you seeing that's encouraging there?
Well, of course, hypothalamus is also composed of cells. So actually, the intervention is still on the cellular level, but I see a stronger emphasis on the actual regulatory mechanism. You know, hypothalamus is our major homeostat, our major system regulating homeostasis or constancy in our body. This idea goes back to a Russian scientist, Vladimir Dilman, even 40 years ago, who was the first to talk about the use of metformin for life extension. You know, and peptides. All this was 40 years ago in Russia. And one of the things he talked about was about the importance of whole body regulation, homeostasis. And the hypothalamus plays a key part in this process. Actually, it's the thing that keeps us going, that keeps us in a steady state. So by repairing this regulatory system, Deng Xinkai from Albert Einstein College was able to actually intervene into the homeostatic system and improve our lifespan as well as our aging process. So I see this as a very promising direction.
Fascinating. Let's introduce the final panelists in this group before we get involved in a more open-ended discussion. So Elena Milova, I think you're in Moscow. If you'd like to say a few words about yourself and your work and pick out a few things that you would like to emphasize as worth attention.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I'm a board member of Life Extension Advocacy Foundation, which is a United States-based nonprofit organization promoting research on aging and rejuvenation. And we're also the initiator of a crowdfunding platform, lifespan.io, which is supporting research on aging by helping the scientists to basically collect funds to get more experiments done. I would like to focus on two things in terms of what happened in the last years, which attracted my attention quite well. Actually, I want to thank my colleagues for introducing quite well all this field, but I still have a few things to add. For instance, I would mention that I admire the work by Michael and Rina Khan-Boy, who are working on the problem of filtering our blood from different wrong signaling factors, in order to help our body to fight the processes of aging better. This is in some way helpful to counteract the harmful processes because of the senescent cells in our body. So this is another way how we could probably, if not solve, then just to mitigate the problem of senescent cells. And another thing that I find quite interesting is the project by Gregory Fay, the project of thymus rejuvenation. Actually, Gregory has done a brilliant work. I believe he ran a pilot clinical trial on people aged 60 and older, I believe, to see if he can make our thymus, which is our immune gland, to rejuvenate, and if it can lead to the restored function of thymus. As you all know, it's very important. Our immunity is very important to support health especially in older years. This is basically our only shield against cancer in the old ages. So actually, this is a huge step forward in terms of supporting the immune function. I hope really much that Gregory is going to be able to run full-size clinical trials the next years, because this looks really, really, really promising.
So how many people were involved in that trial?
I believe it's 10 people, I believe. We're expecting the publication to come out soon, so we're going to know more details about how exactly it was done. I'm receiving quite a lot of questions because we interviewed Gregory, but he only could share just his overall positive expression over his study.
And say a little bit more about the blood filtering.
Well, you see, you probably have heard about the projects of Ambrosia, of a blood transfusion, when the young blood gets transfused to old people in order to help their body regenerate. Well, it turns out that this method doesn't really look like the best one, because this way you will only get your old blood with all the harmful factors in it diluted by young blood, which doesn't mean that you actually remove these harmful factors. And what Irina and Michael Conboy did, they tested if it's possible to identify the harmful factors that are present in the old blood, and if it's possible actually to remove them by this or that way. So far, if I'm not mistaken, they have two approaches to that. One approach is to create a device that will allow the blood filtering, physical blood filtering from these factors. And another one is to use different drugs in order to destroy these harmful factors that are present in the old blood. We're going to see what happens, but I'm really excited about that because it looks like a very simple method that can be applied to literally everyone. Because it doesn't really have any sort of obstacles like, I don't know, the conflict of your genetic material, allergies, and all things that still can happen if you get transfused by the blood of another person. So let's see what happens, and I believe that they are very keen to keep studying, keep moving in these directions. Probably we're going to hear quite soon about the progress in this regard. And yeah, you have a question?
No, I mean, that's fascinating input about scientific
very nice
mechanisms. What about advocacy? Have you seen?
Advocacy is actually a very interesting thing. I will say that these last years were an example of unexpected synergies. I will name it like this. For instance, you probably know that in September, a book by Jim Mellon, who is one of the investment guru, came out, right? The book called Juvenescence. I'm sorry, I don't really have it at hand right now to show you. Yet it's a book by someone who is very respected in the world of investment, who is a businessman himself, and who writes about what aging is and how close we are to the solution, and who literally makes a list of all biotech companies working on different sort of cures against aging. This was totally unexpected. And this is really, really happy occasion, because this way you actually make another sort of audience focus their attention on our cause, on all this field of rejuvenation technologies. And let's see what happens, but I believe this opens many new possibilities, especially for biotech companies, of course, but also it helps to convince the general audience, because you have someone really respectable speaking about rejuvenation tech as it was really feasible in our lifetime. This was example number one. And the example number two, the best one is probably the role model that we have among businessmen who start using the available methods of healthy life extension on themselves, and who present their results, who share the results of their genetic testing, the test of their bloods to identify the biomarkers of aging, and who would actually share this with the general public in order to create, again, interest to all this field. They may not call it this way. They may not indicate that their greatest value is actually to extend life. For instance, Serge Faguet, who published his article that he spent $200,000 on biohacking not long ago, he says that his most interest is to be as productive as possible, which is totally good with me. But you understand, of course, that if a person is monitoring their health really, really carefully, and if this person is using all the methods available to remain healthy for as long as possible, this will obviously lead to a longer life. So again, it's a huge benefit for our community that we are now having such a support, unexpected support, in fact.
And what was the person's name?
Parrish. It's actually a businessman originally from Russia, but who is now leading several projects in Silicon Valley, and who met with Ray Kurzweil. And apparently he was inspired by the example of Ray Kurzweil, and he decided that probably this is something worth trying. And he wrote a very long article and published it and promoted it everywhere about his experience in biohacking. And it provoked a huge wave of interest, especially from mass media, but also from the general public. And right now, there are many people who just want to try something on themselves. And actually, it helped our community quite a lot, because there is now a very strong interest from mass media. For instance, my colleague in Russia, they get calls almost every week, and the reporters are asking to give an interview, to share their experience as well. It's something that never happened before, never. And the third example that I wanted to share with you today is the example, again, of an unexpected synergy. I believe that we're going to touch this topic a bit later, because it's a great story to tell. It's a great story of activism by Ilya Stambler, but I will mention it because it's really, really important. This year, the new WHO working program was issued, and it was not so good in terms of supporting the efforts to keep old people healthy. Let's put it this way. And the unexpected collaboration that I would like to mention is that usually we don't really team up with the social gerontology, because, well, they have their set of issues to solve, we have our set of issues to solve, and we often even sort of compete for different resources. But this was not the case this time. And it was very nice to see that once the question was asked, once Ilya told our community that there is a problem with this working program of the WHO, we united our efforts with all the big organizations in the field of protection of old people's rights, including such organizations like the International Federation of Aging, for instance. And it led to a very successful solution of the situation. Ilya will say more about that because he knows the situation better than me, of course. And yet it is, again, an example of an unexpected collaboration that is promoting our cause, that is helping us achieve more.
Fascinating. So all five of you have put lots of interesting points on the table. I'm also keeping an eye on the comments in the YouTube chat window. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to ask all five of you to respond again in the same order as before, to keep it simple. Either you can pick up some of the themes you've heard your colleagues, or you can share something more from before that you didn't have the time to explain fully. Or there's three questions I've noticed, three types of questions in the chat window. One of them is, well, what advice will you give people for their own therapy? What drugs or supplements or other mechanisms should people individually be pursuing if they want to do exactly what you were saying now, Elena, make yourself more productive and increase your own chance of living longer? So what's the practical thing that you might recommend? Secondly, there's questions about possible complications from some of the treatments. For example, if we extend the telomeres, is that potentially going to make cancer worse? Or are there other side effects from some of the treatments that you're talking about? How do we know, and how do we keep on top of that? And thirdly, there's a lot here, but so don't try and answer all of them, but pick one of them. Thirdly, there's the question is, if we're collecting this data, if people are finding more information, how can we be sure it's being used for the general good and not being hived away just to boost the profits of individual companies? And to the audience, please keep dropping questions into the chat window, and we'll try to pick them up as we go along. But let's come now to Johnny again. What would you like to say to all of that? You're mute, by the way. Johnny, over to you. We can't hear you.
Thanks. My phone rang, so I muted and forgot, of course. Thank you, David, and everyone. My answer now is an extension of some of the details that I didn't take up the time to get to before. I had left off with, for people like myself, doing self-directed age management studies. And again, I stress to anyone who wants to do such a thing, it should be under expert physician supervision and cautiously and with safety in mind. But regarding that, this relates to complications. Going to the gym or to an aging meeting or to your doctor or jogging or sex for that matter, they all carry some risk. And all of the above at one time carry great risk, but recognizing that aging is 100% fatal, it has to be a careful balance where you take your challenge, where you take your chances intelligently. But for those self-selected lab rats, I don't mean to denigrate it. I'll rephrase that, self-directed age management researchers like myself. Some of the initiatives, one is called Open Cures, and some folks who have been active in our community for a long time are creating that, and I'm helping. Kevin Parrott, probably many of you recognize him, and also very bright young man, Joshua Noah. Another one, Steve Perry, has his GDF-11 cohort, and our own gerontology research group is now breaking into special interest groups, and I'm particularly active in the microbiome group, where we're going to evaluate potential probiotics, prebiotics, and others, and try them on themselves. And this, it's a very powerful thing. What really excited me about the microbiome, among about 1,000 other things, but its relationship to DNA methylation. But I'll say that I've personally seen the results in my close associates, and Liz has communicated her positive results to me. And these are the kinds of things that, again, with the main question of our meeting today, a year and a half ago, I was not personally seeing those results. But some other positive...
There's a question for you about cord blood plasma. Is that something you know about?
Well, yes, that's something that I was about to get to. We've been studying that a lot and gone down quite a learning path, and also attended the American Association of Blood Banks conference, a couple of Cord Blood Association conferences. That deals with the next topic regarding, high-level institutional review board monitored clinical trials. Recently, we learned of one that's up on clinicaltrials.gov for umbilical cord plasma. I've contacted them with the intention of enrolling. 03229785, and cord plasma is #1 on my list of many many things, and there are other number ones, but you know, that's the number one I'm thinking of right now for innovative therapies. I previously mentioned the University of California. To my mind, it's a landmark stem cell study because the disease condition is frailty, which is a severe marker of aging. But you know, so many others. I'll rattle a few off that are in process now.
You said that we shouldn't try any of this ourselves unless we get expert physician supervision. How can we find such expert physicians to supervise us? Maybe many GPs aren't particularly interested in this field, and many of us don't have a lot of money to spend on expensive doctors. What's your advice as to how we get this expert physician oversight?
Yeah, well, that sidebar is a whole discussion on itself, but I will try to be brief.
60 seconds or so on it.
I'm sorry, say again?
If you could try and answer it within 60 seconds or so, then we'll move on.
That I will do. You can be misled by many self-styled experts who appear to have outstanding credentials, but in fact do not. Of the 10 or 11 I've consulted with personally, most didn't really know much. Some of them go to these weekend seminars and start thinking they're neuroendocrinologists and getting into areas of treatment that they're really not qualified. Just finding guidance, just contact me personally and we'll talk about that.
Okay, let's move on.
If I may, back to the main topic, or should we stay on this? It's the viewers' conference.
This is such an interesting discussion that we're going to run out of time. So other panelists have got lined up with things to say. Maybe just another 30 seconds from you, and then we'll move on, Johnny.
Well, yes. The other things that I have seen that echo some of what the other panelists have said, that give me a lot of optimism, more refined ways of measuring various aspects of age, and I could discuss them, but I'll move on. Innovative companies in the regenerative medicine space. There's a report by the Aging Analytics Agency, Ontology Research Foundation, and Deep Knowledge Ventures that names about 100 of them. I won't here, but venture capitalists and other investors. And again, I've mentioned some results that I've seen, the lab work of people in my close circle of associates.
Thanks.
So
we may come back. That's it for me. Yeah, we may come back to some of these points again. Liz, anything you'd like to add to the conversation based on the questions?
Yeah, sure, because this is actually our level of expertise. So how do you take a therapeutic and see if it's extending your lifespan? How do you ensure that it's safe? How do you know what the data is on it? Of course, we focus on gene and cell therapy, but BioViva is a platform for that. That's what we do. We're starting our first consulting agreement with the first consensual use of gene therapy company. That's a company that we'll be dealing with, and we'll be running all the data on those patients. Transparency, you want third-party transparency. You want companies like ours running that data so that companies are not running their own data. How do we know that any drug that we take is safe if companies meet their own endpoints? So it's a big deal. I think that it's a data system. So some of the new therapies that we'll see this next year, excuse me, in the coming years, and so on, will be therapies that we have very little data in humans. So for instance, one person asked, is telomerase induction safe? Does it cause cancer? I've done a lot of cancer testing. My cancer risks are extremely low. I did the largest dose of telomerase-inducing gene therapy that we know of, but I am an N=1. So as our patients come through our pipeline in the coming year, we'll have more and more data. And if there is a risk of cancer, we need to actually create a transparency on that, or actually define. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We certainly want to separate the patient's initial risk and what happened and what the outcomes were. So I don't believe that telomerase induction creates cancer. I think that it will actually mitigate our risk of cancer over time, but that has to be proven. So what we need is a transparent system. So what we're building and what we've built with BioViva is we have a couple arms. One is manufacturing. I guess we have three arms. One is research and development, which is going to go hot and heavy this year. And the third one is the platform with bioinformatics actually running the data on patients. And it's an architecture of participation. So how do you know that one guy isn't lying to you when he says that his drug will actually cure your disease? I don't like the word cure. We don't know. We don't really have any out there. So what we're doing is we're creating participation where companies are now signing up with us. Their name is not put out there as a partner. Their drug is brought into our clinic network, and then our doctors basically build a protocol based on their drug, and we run the bioinformatics on our side as to what is happening with that drug with total transparency. Companies are very excited about this. One reason is if we have good data, your ability to raise money for your drug with investors is going to be exponentially higher. That's just one area. Number two, we're giving patients access with extremely low barriers to trials, but at a data-driven event that is like a clinical trial. And then, of course, number three is lock-in. It's a complete network that works together to help patients feed itself and incur the potential of investment that it takes to get these drugs through a regulatory system like the FDA. So what I would tell you is, I worked 2 years in stem cells before I even started BioViva, and the problem with offshore stem cell use is that there was really no evidence besides testimonials as to whether the therapies were working. We're mixing researchers with medical doctors and getting the results out. So even the most promising drugs right now out there, we really don't know if they'll extend your life or maybe make your life good for a short period of time. So how you actually find out is data, data, data. And the platform system is the best system. We can work with the entire community and increase the cause whilst driving that data.
Liz, there is a question about anything you might say about BioViva's progress itself in terms of previously, last year, you were saying that you might be doing more human trials, launching drugs in 2018. Is there anything you can say about that, or is it that for another day?
Well, I can tell you this. BioViva realized that as a U.S. company, we were not able to give patients access to drugs without the threat of being shut down very quickly. So we have actually coordinated consulting agreements with companies who can, and they launched this year. So what we're best at is getting data. Now, we may run some of the drugs that we have through that therapeutic pipeline, and how people would get involved in that as they would go to that company, which we'll be announcing on BioViva within, I think, a week and a half now. They can go to that company and they can talk to doctors. Doctors will actually specialize a treatment for them depending on what disease they're trying to treat. And they may or may not get our drug. It's all based on what the doctors think would be best for that patient. So that would be a way to get involved in some of the things that we're doing. We're also building manufacturing this year. And so we can actually do our own research and development in that, and potentially sell to the public. And we, for research purposes only, that would only be to research organizations. And then the third thing we're doing is we'll be announcing what university we'll be working with in probably the next 6 weeks to start our research and development program. We have, I think, 12 targets, and we will be working into each one of those targets succinctly. Some of them are very exciting new technology, and some of them are just creating more information and more background on the genes of interest that we're already working on.
Well, we look forward to these bits of news when you're able to share them.
Hey, thanks.
Sven, what would you like to pick up in terms of all the discussion threads?
Well, I would like to focus on question 1 from the audience and 2. Question 1, I will be briefly, what can you do today? I will split it into 2 parts. The first part is what can you really do on yourself to live longer? And that sadly still is to, have a good lifestyle, avoid smoking, have a good diet, exercise, those types of things. There are some things, potentially experimental things you can do on yourself. But if you decide to go on that path, tread carefully, because, you can also do harm to yourself. And so, don't go on the experimental path without expert guidance.
So would you recommend turmeric or metformin or rapamycin as well as the good lifestyle, things like not smoking and exercising?
Well, there are potential things people can be doing. I'm trying to be a little bit careful here because, obviously, there are risks with some of the experimental things associated, and also you need to take into account that some of these things cannot work for everyone. So, you might have a health condition that prevents you from taking a certain drug. So that's always why you need to consult a doctor or an expert on the topic before you do anything.
And where do you find such an expert?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, obviously check online also if you can find any physician, a physician who is board certified, family physician who is open to, help people with aging or with, lifestyle modification, and I mean, you can try multiple doctors, obviously, until you find someone who is, willing to help you and who listens to you and respects you and who also knows what he's talking about. But the second part of what you can do is you can really start to support aging research. I mean, that's really, the biggest thing you can do to make a difference. That's talking to your family members and friends about this, putting it on your social media, participating in, for example, Calmance Day that is upcoming, on the 21st, I think, of this month, right? Which is basically you just take a selfie of yourself with some olive oil or chocolate or something like that, put it on your Facebook profile. You probably have many friends who are not yet convinced about aging research. Well, write a little text with your photograph and explain, well, I'm doing this as a type of challenge, just like you had the ice bucket challenge, to raise awareness for aging research. And aging research is important because 90% of the people in the developed world are dying as a consequence of diseases of aging. There is so much suffering from aging. Tell that to your friends and convince them. You can obviously, if you want, donate some money to various organizations that support aging research and so on. So those are really what you can do today that really make a difference. The second part is the complications of treatments. Well, we have a very good way of knowing if a drug has complications. It's called clinical trials. So actually, I would like to shift the question a little bit. The question is not, how do we know if a treatment has complications? We know how to do that. The question is, how do we prove that the treatment works against aging? And that's a bigger question, because currently there is no officially agreed upon protocol to test if a drug works in humans for aging, and then have that drug approved on the market. So one way, to do it is to look at biomarkers of aging. For that, we need to have established biomarkers that really work to predict if a drug will slow down aging, yes or no. A second thing is, of course, we can give it to very old people who are already quite sick and see if the drug improves their lives. Sadly, with that is the problem that it's sometimes too late to intervene when someone is already really damaged. Think about many of the drugs on Alzheimer's fail, probably because they are being tested in an advanced stage of Alzheimer's when nothing will work anymore. So those are questions that we really need to find answers to, and that aren't really currently completely solved. And then there is, of course, the regulatory path. We need to convince the FDA, making aging a disease, or at least something that is open to medical intervention. And of course that will entail developing a pipeline to have these drugs approved, and that's really where the major problem currently sits.
You mentioned earlier about progress with biomarkers. You mentioned about a clock measurement of aging, if I remember right.
Yes, that's correct.
So
yes,
something like that, you think it could get more respect more widely, and then people could see, well, this drug is impacting this biomarker, therefore it's something that we should encourage.
Yes, though I should mention that I personally don't believe there is going to be one biomarker of aging. I don't think one biomarker will measure all aspects of aging. I think we will probably need to develop a panel of biomarkers, and I think the Horvath clock, which is a clock based on epigenetics, is probably one of the biomarkers that we are going to use. But there are possibly other biomarkers as well. You can measure skin autofluorescence to look at advanced glycation end products, which is a type of modification of proteins that occurs with aging. We will maybe need to look at biomarkers of measuring the amount of senescent cells that we have in our bodies. Telomere length might be a possible biomarker, and so on. So we might have to develop a panel of biomarkers.
Great.
And then, of course, maybe it's also the right moment to come back to something that was mentioned before. I'm not certain who it was. Again, it might be Johnny who mentioned it. The TAME trial, of course, on metformin. So that's one of the pioneering trials, because this is a trial where we really, for the first time, are going to test a drug where in elderly people. And the reason this drug was selected and was being tested is because it has been shown to delay aging in animals.
And is this test actually going to go ahead? I've been hearing people talk about this TAME test proposed for nearly 2 years. Has it got some funding to make it go forward in significant quantities?
Well, to be honest, I don't have an insight behind the screens of what is going on there. But I think indeed it's the trial was approved by the FDA. So the protocol, the FDA said you have a good protocol. I think that now the question is to really put it into practice, and that entails raising funding to do the trial. And I think they are still working on that. So right. I have no clue exactly when the trial is going to start.
Let's move on, if you don't mind, because we've already been talking for more than an hour, and there's quite a few things I'd like to feed into the conversation before we finish. Ilya, would you like to add more to the discussion?
Yes, I would, actually. I would like to combine the three major questions that are asked. What should we do? How do we avoid complications, side effects, and how do we make sure that as many people as possible benefit? I would say get as many people interested as possible. I mean, that's the solution, both on the side of research, even the most informal, popular research, as well as advocacy, because after all, we're all interested in healthy life extension. All of us, I mean, that's our common ground, and we have to seek and promote it and nurture it. And thank you very much, Elena, for mentioning our campaign in November. That's really an example how this can be done, right? We are not looking for enemies. We're not enemies with anybody. We're not enemies with social gerontologists or geriatricians. We're not even enemies with so-called bioconservatives. They're just normal people who want to a longer and healthy life. They're just afraid that life extended therapies may kill them. So we actually have to work on the safety side more. So and in this campaign, we were able to find a lot of common grounds with a lot of organizations. Hundreds of people wrote, from both aging-related organizations and even not aging-related organizations, common people, lay people, scientists. A lot of people were able to join forces for the common good, for healthy aging. They call it, we call it healthy longevity. It doesn't matter. We want to be healthy in old age. And there was an important outcome that I think can be common ground as well. and that is that the World Health Organization adopted a very basic metric for healthcare, for health, and that is healthy life expectancy. I think that's one big metric that we can all advocate at every level, right? Because that basically means healthy longevity. That means not just prolonging life, but prolonging healthy life. So I think that
and is that easy to measure? Can people agree what healthy life expectancy is?
When it comes to actual measurement, there are differences of methods. Right now, I would say that that is measured a bit primitively. You know, they just ask people, do they have a serious health condition? You know, I was sick, but of course you can adopt biomarkers, you can adopt actual objective metrics for that. But that's a more scientific question. But at least as a goal, we can all agree that healthy life extension, healthy life expectancy increase is our goal. And that's sort of the rallying ground, that the rallying cry that we can actually use to bring a lot of people to our cause. Now the question is, how do we do it, and what do we do next? I'm not sure. Now this campaign was successful. Now it's in the documents. We have the approval of the WHO for this goal. But now, how do we advocate it? How do we actually advance? And that's the thing that we can discuss maybe in some other consultation with other activists. Maybe, you know, during October, during the longevity months, we can join our forces again together. But what's important is really that we can find and we can advance a common ground, and that's how I think we should address all these questions. We just encourage people to think so themselves, because if we have this common ground, we can all move along our own path, but eventually, you know, create a gradient toward our common goal of healthy life extension.
Fascinating. Elena, you've been listening very patiently to all of this. I think you've got quite a few things you'd like to chip in.
And I just must say, 1 second, thanks to Elena, thanks to everybody who participated in this campaign. You know, Elena was also very instrumental in this campaign, and many others, and Sven and Johnny and Liz. So thanks again. It's all a common victory.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, Ilya. And the things that I wanted to add to the ideas listed above is that we really do need in our self-experimentation to follow the advice of a medical specialist, of course, yes. And one of the paths towards this situation is actually to keep educating the general audience about rejuvenation technologies, because doctors, they are just mere ordinary people, basically. And if you reach out to them and if you get them interested, you can get them on board, and they can become the advisors within a project which is trying to spread and make more accessible different rejuvenation treatments. And it's really important to involve the medical community, and I'm going to show you why. This is a book in Russian. It's called Potential Geroprotectors. It's written by a team of Russian scientists led by Alexey Moskalev, who is one of the well-known Russian gerontologists. Now, it's 600 pages long. So you imagine the amount of different substances and drugs and different compounds that might have a geroprotective effect. It's very, very difficult to choose which ones are going to work best. It's very difficult to understand how all these substances and drugs are going to interact between themselves. And this is exactly why gathering more data is so crucial. But waiting for clinical trials, for official clinical trials, is not the only way that we can proceed. There is another way, and I'm very, very proud to say that two teams who are my compatriots started two projects to make this happen faster. One of them is Open Longevity Project. I dropped the links in our chat of speakers so you could share. Open Longevity is a project by the Foundation Science for Life Extension, led by Michael Batin, who is one of the most famous, I guess, proponents of life extension here in Russia. And their main idea is, as soon as we have quite a lot of supporters here in Russia, and especially living in a big city, why don't we unite them and involve them into organizing patient clinical trials? Actually, patient clinical trials are no different from normal clinical trials organized by research organizations. It's all the same. The methodology gets developed by scientists with a good reputation. The overall process has to pass all the same stages of clinical trials registration, locally or internationally. This doesn't really matters. And as a result, you can actually get the clinical trials done without such huge expenditures as it usually occurs. Because, you know, one of the biggest problems of our community is still funding. It's funding for fundamental science, which we are trying to solve via crowdfunding on lifespan.io. It's also the problem of funding clinical trials. Well, it turns out that if you run patient-organized clinical trials, the patients are usually like-minded people who want the results faster, who want to know what geroprotectors can really have benefits for their health. And they pay for the trial themselves, which solves most of the question related to funding in this case. And you are gathering this information in case of open longevity. They are gathering this information in their system. And then the team of scientists who are working with them analyze this information and comes to a conclusion regarding different aspects of rejuvenation technologies. Of course, they are going to begin with the simplest things, with the most safe things, like, for instance, the fasting mimicking diet. Yet they are going to collect very crucial information in order to progress to make all these longevity strategies more controllable. And what I like about them the most is that this is not the only thing that they are doing, actually. Clinical trials is the foundation, let's say, of this project. But what they also develop is a service, consulting service for people who would like to have some sort of longevity strategy developed with help of a medical advisor, and who would like to see if the choices that they are making in terms of geroprotectors or in terms of lifestyle interventions or physical activity, for instance, if these choices are really helpful to get their biomarkers of aging, to keep the biomarkers of aging at good levels. And
so when will this information be shared or published?
Yes, absolutely. This is going to be published, and of course it's going to be published open access. And one of the best things about them that they published the list of biomarkers that their scientific team developed. And just recently in November, I made my first test. This is the results of my first test. So they analyzed quite a lot of different aspects of what's going on in my body. There are different inflammation signals, different aspects of my blood. I mean, cholesterol, for instance, low density.
So are you changing your lifestyle or taking any medications or as a result of this?
As many people, I started to take things in a blind mode. This is absolutely a normal situation. You know, when you first enter the community and people say, oh, you know, metformin might be good for your health. Well, you can test metformin because metformin is very safe. You can test some other things. For instance, vitamin D3 is believed to be very beneficial for your health. Vitamin B group is believed to be beneficial for your health, and many, many other things. But it turns out that if you're doing it in a blind mode, you can never know if these substances are actually helping you or destroying your health. Subjective sensations are not so reliable, so you really need everything tested to see if you are getting enough levels of this or that supplement or not. In my case, it was very informative because, for instance, I'm taking supplements of D3 and vitamin B12, and yet the test shows that both these vitamins, I have a deficiency of both these vitamins. So now I had to increase the dose that I'm taking, and hopefully it's going to get to norm now. But this is not the only thing why testing is so important. It turns out that you can be more sensitive, or a substance can be more bioavailable in your body and all, and you can actually overdose. And overdose can be detrimental to your health no less than the deficiency. So again, if you're doing things in a blind mode, most possibly you're not going to get a good result, especially because if you are mixing things in a blind mode, you know, mixing 600 pages of geroprotectors, well, it turns out that there is a huge possibility that they are going to counteract each other. For instance, it's known that antioxidants and hormetins can actually counteract each other. So you can take both and get zero result, zero, if not negative. Okay, so I told you about the Open Longevity project, but there is another project, a similar one, a little bit younger. It's called eHealth, eHealth First, also led by several Russian specialists. The lead of the project is Nikolai Kryuchkov, a person who has a long experience in working in the field of healthcare. And there is a very impressive international team behind the project. But this project, unlike the Open Longevity, is purely commercial. So they are going to develop a service of medical consultation for people who would like to develop a longevity strategy. Again, this is absolutely amazing that we have these type of tools right now, because this means that now we are getting much more serious about any interventions that we're using to extend our life.
So the audience aren't convinced by these websites. They say they can't log into them, and they're getting warnings that they are scams and that there's problems with the whole ICO mechanism. I mean, I must say, I mean, I clicked on the links and I got a tilde sign as well, and I put HTTPS in the front, and it let me in the second time. But let's just say it sounds interesting, but people need to investigate with their eyes open.
Yeah, well, I will let them know that they must improve the sites.
No, people aren't complaining about this. I don't know why the links haven't quite worked. But there's a concern that the involvement with ICOs and coins is in some people's minds a red flag.
Well, it's a little bit hard to talk about the red flags as soon as actually just not long ago, for instance, Sense Research Foundation received a huge donation in the new cryptocurrency Ethereum. And so, you know, I think we're getting to the point when all these things become mainstream.
Right. We got to press on because we've had such a fascinating discussion that we haven't really got much time left. I would like to ask, anybody wants to answer a question that's come up on Alzheimer's. You know, we've had lots of discussions about lots of aspects of aging and cancer, amongst other treatments. Has anybody got something positive to say about hope for curing this dreadful disease, which is one of the diseases of aging?
Well, things haven't been very good last month. So Pfizer decided in the beginning of January to cancel their neuroscience research, including on Alzheimer's disease. And then there was another paper on solanezumab, which is a monoclonal antibody against Alzheimer's disease, that was also found to be ineffective. So things aren't looking so good, and there are possibly two main reasons why many of the drug trials have failed. One, as I alluded to earlier, was that they might have started some of these trials too late, when people are already extraordinarily ill. You know, when nerve cells have died, there is little you can do to regain them. And then there is the other thing, and that is that maybe some of these, well, you know, virtually everything that is being investigated is focused on the amyloid plaques, and maybe we are looking at one target. Maybe the amyloid plaques are late stage, when it's already too late, and we need to focus on some of the molecular mechanisms that start earlier and that eventually lead to these plaques. So we need way more fundamental research on why Alzheimer's disease is happening, what the mechanisms are. And, you know, again, targeting aging may be a better approach than targeting the disease.
What's the evidence for that? Is it just I know we all wish that's the case, And we can see that it's probably is the case in some of the other diseases. But what's the evidence that aging really is the underlying cause of Alzheimer's?
Well, there is. I have to admit here that obviously, you know, the link between aging and Alzheimer's disease isn't as explored as we would wish it to be. But for example, calorie restriction, which retards aging, also retards the accumulation of amyloid beta in the brain of monkeys. So there is some suggestion there that that treatments against aging and Alzheimer's could potentially be interlinked. You know, that aging could, that retarding aging could prevent Alzheimer's. But yes, I admit it's not fully proven. But
anybody else? Johnny, do you have any insights on Alzheimer's? Any of the many trials that you've been following address that?
Nothing that I can formulate right now. Maybe a little later.
Yeah. I see Steve Hill is commenting on the audience window that J147 has some promising indications, but maybe we need to dig into this on another occasion.
I think that Alzheimer's is going to be a combinatorial effect unless we actually treat the patients young enough. And so we're looking at some companies. There's a great company right here in Seattle called M3, and they have a small molecule that's regrowing neurons. We've also seen this in some of the drugs on the market, like Singulair has some evidence in mice models that it's doing the same. But actually slowing the progression of aging will be very important, and the brain will be a very touchy aspect. So when we look at aging, people say, well, I can visually see aging on the outside, so I want to fix my skin. I don't know what's happening on the inside. But if you look at the slice of a brain of an 87-year-old compared to a 26-year-old, an 87-year-old never diagnosed with dementia of any type, you'll see the atrophy. So it's not just Alzheimer's we want to go after. It's not just if you have a predisposition for Alzheimer's. It's actually aging itself and what it does to the brain over time. So if we look at combinatorial therapies that both tackle aging and regrow neurons and then actually help remove the cumulative effects of the damage that's caused in the buildup of proteins, and I think that we'll have a benefit. But that's why getting into a proper trial, not a clinical trial, but a trial with a doctor and going over the methodology and finding the proper combinatorial therapies will be essential.
Ilya, do you want to add in here?
Yes, please. Talking about seeking common grounds and making interventions available, and trying to combine public health and science. There are probably things that every one of us can do. While those sophisticated trials have been failing, like vaccines against Alzheimer and research in major pharmaceutical corporations have been failing. I think that we can do. There's a lot of evidence that Alzheimer's is just type 3 diabetes, that there's a lot of common mechanisms with type 2 diabetes and just basic aging process like reductions in insulin sensitivity. So you could probably do a lot of improvement just by reducing your sugar intake, especially from sugar beverages. And just a basic physical exercise. If there is one proven remedy for a lot of aging related issues, that's exercise. Even in the amounts that WHO recommends, like 150 minutes a week, you can do a lot of improvement even for Alzheimer or other age related decline. So that's what I would recommend.
So we're almost out of time. I'd like to give each panelist one more chance to put some input into the conversation. And here's a couple of things you might want to comment on. There's been a lot of chat in the live window about maybe we should be doing more testing on different kinds of animals. For example, not just mice, but also on horses. There is a whole strand of research that when making horses run faster is very big business, of course. And so if you have any insights into other kinds of animal trials and the possible benefits, then by all means comment. The other thing you might want to comment on is, well, and this is a bigger question, well, what are your own goals? What are your own goals, say, for the next 12 months? What are the things you're looking forward to? And this might be a chance also to mention any significant projects or significant events that are coming up that you're involved with. So where should we start? Johnny, do you want to go first again?
Yeah, gladly. Thank you, David. I do have answers to some of the other questions that our attendees have asked, but I do want to jump to goals. Ultimately, I think all of us truly want to make this world a better place and bring happiness to everyone and reduce the misery. But keeping with the topic of this session, regarding goals and goal setting, our brain works best when given factual, specific goals to work on. So mine is for all of you to join me at my big 100th birthday party, December 17th, 2049. It's going to be a hoot, as we say here in the States. There's going to be laughter and music. We're going to get the Rolling Stones to play, so mark your calendar.
Some of the Rolling Stones at that stage will be even more than 100 years old.
Okay.
I don't know. So December, what was the date?
December 17th.
December 17th, 2049. I'll put that in my diary, yes. Maybe at that stage I'll be able to play the guitar as well. Who knows?
Oh, great. I'll join you.
Okay. Liz, anything you'd like to say in terms of goals or events coming up or projects or indeed on testing in animals?
Well, as far as testing on animals, if we want to find out what works in humans, we need to work in humans. We should have some basic data of safety, and we should have some basic safety data in human cells. So in that case, animals are fantastic to show a basic outline, but there have been plenty of drugs that have gone through animal models and failed in humans. I mean, a lot of drugs. Even by phase 3, most drugs actually fail coming through trials. But of course, having your pets safe and having longevity for them is beneficial to your life. And horses are a big interest of mine. Certainly, we can make animals stronger and healthier. We know that in some model organisms, we can extend lifespan, and I think that people would like to see that for their cats, their dogs, their horses, and various animals. So those are all within realm. As far as getting human data, though, I wouldn't expect that to translate very well, and human data is, again, the most important. We shouldn't take a drug with no background research, but we should certainly take drugs with basic research already done and translate it to humans, and that's what we do as a company. What was the second question? What we're doing this year? This year, my head will be down, and hopefully you will just see maybe a myriad of press releases or information coming out. I'm really going to cut my talks back so that we can focus on what we're doing as a company, because the most important thing is delivering. And again, look for us in the next week and a half to 2 weeks, making a big announcement, offering patients their first access to medical doctors that can start treatments that, again, be very careful when you go to a website and it says we have a cure. There are no cures for aging yet. We need to create cures for aging, and that will take us a significant amount of time. Maybe our entire lifespans, because we have to bust the barriers of 120 to see if we can actually live longer. But living well now would be the goal, and we are now, and we want people to join us, and we will continue that process of success. So, thanks.
Super. Let's have some final comments from Sven. Anything you'd like to say about events or projects or goals?
Yes, so let's comment on other animals. Well, I think in recent years we have seen that more different models than just mice and rats are being studied. For example, the naked mole rats, which Rochelle Buffenstein at Calico is doing, that was sequenced the genome. Also, Joao Pedro's group sequenced the bowhead whale. And then, of course, metformin, for example, is being tested in dogs by Matt Chamberlain, and actually also currently in primates. So we do see more work on animals that are closer to humans than mice and rats. But of course, the problem is that these animals all live way longer than humans, and so it's very hard to do any interventions testing and get quick results. But they are a good stepping stone between mice and humans. And then, of course, I will also...
Did you mention dogs? I was a bit distracted. I mean, there is this dog aging project in which dogs have been given, is it rapamycin?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, by Matka in Berlin. And sorry, you have corrected me because I said metformin. I was obviously referring to rapamycin rather than metformin. And so then I just want to reach out about EHA 2018, our conference that we are organizing in Brussels. It will be 8th to 10th of November this year. And it's going to be a really good conference. It's already the 4th conference in a row. So I hope to see you there.
And people can find information about EHA either by Googling it or, in fact, on the London Futurists page for this event. There's information about it at the bottom. Great. Ilya, what would you like to leave as your parting thoughts?
Well, I would certainly hope to see much more advocacy, longevity advocacy, more people involved in the movement, because I believe our movement can become truly massive, even bigger than the green movement. They have nothing on us. We're more important. So we are not enemies with them either. But I do hope that more people adopt this goal of healthy life extension, healthy life expectancy as a metrics, as the basic metrics of public health success, of their own success, of their close one success. And I hope we see more of that. I hope our Israeli association, does our part. I do hope it will become more massive with more outreach this year. I have quite a few, projects lined up, but I'll share them in due course on Facebook, and as well as internationally. I do hope we can, combine our efforts more. Hopefully, during the October or some other occasions, I do hope we become a true movement. We are not yet.
We're getting there, stage by stage. Elena, closing words.
Well, I just wanted to say a few words to the point that Sven has raised about the bottlenecks in testing different things in animals, for instance. Of course, it will be great to test in big animals, but it turns out that they live too long, and then the whole process of finding a new treatment for people is going to be longer again. So I think that we should be looking towards new methods of drug discovery, and specifically, for instance, how to implement the artificial intelligence to drug discovery. And to that point, on February 21, we're going to host an expert panel discussion with the team of Alex Zhavarnkov and the Mouse Age project, where we are going to discuss how the artificial intelligence can be used for drug discovery and for other projects in the rejuvenation industry. So please join in, and let's try to find our way to get the cure against aging faster.
How can people find out about that?
Yes, on our Facebook page, or Facebook page of lifespan.io, you can find this event, and feel free to join and ask questions during the panel. It's going to take questions during the stream, so please feel free to attend. And to the point, what we have as plans for this year. Well, first of all, I want to mention that we at lifespan.io are going to host, hopefully are going to host an interesting research project by David Sinclair related to the DNA repair techniques. We might start it this spring, but we will see how well the preparation goes. And then most of our other activities are going to be focused on promotion of different aspects of rejuvenation technologies, basically advocacy and educating the public. So here I would like to mention that we are going to be present and at several conferences this year. First to mention is, of course, the Undoing Aging Conference, organized jointly by Sense Research Foundation and Forever Healthy Foundation. And thank them very much for this great opportunity, because you know what? this will be the first time when a Life Extension Advocacy Foundation team is going to meet in person. This is a unique opportunity. Most of us, we have never had such an opportunity to meet in person.
So that's in Berlin next month?
Yes, March 15 and to 17, I believe. It's going to be really, really interesting. And my call to the members of our community is that if you know of some reporters, journalists, people who are writing articles about rejuvenation technologies, please let them know of this event, because it's the constellation of speakers you cannot even imagine. It's going to be very, very interesting, and it's a great opportunity to share with the world what's happening in rejuvenation industry. Another conference that I'm going to attend will happen in Kazan in April, from 22 to 26, if I'm not mistaken.
Kazan in
Kazan is in Russia. Yes, Kazan is in Russia. And what's interesting, the list of speakers is as impressive as at Undoing Aging. So I really hope that you have a look at the site of the conference and consider coming, because again, you're going to know a lot of interesting things happening in the biotechnology field. And then we're going to have 2 RAD festivals this year, which is going to be very interesting as well. Some journalists might not be friendly enough, let's say, towards RAD, but I believe every opportunity to promote our ideas is great. And, as they say, different folks, different strokes. Some people might not like the radical messaging. Some people might be more susceptible to them. So let it happen and see how it can get us closer to our common goal.
That's happening in Bangkok in June. That's
in Bangkok in June.
Is it July, or I can't remember? It's sometime in the summer. Yes.
Yes, June 8, 9, and then in United States in September. So get
great. So there's many more conferences than before, and there's a lot of really good high caliber material there. It's scientists who spent their whole life in this field, and there's also advocates who have been thinking very long and hard how impact can be made onto the general public's thinking, and how the resources of society as a whole can be more effectively steered and applied into this area. So there's plenty of interesting things happening, and we just need to keep joining things up. We need to ensure that all the interest is works together, positive collaboration. And thanks to all of you for being part of that positive collaboration. I think we're out of time. We've already gone, 7 minutes over, so I apologize for that. But it was such an interesting conversation that I didn't have the heart to chop it off earlier. But I will cut it off now and let people get back to the real task of living healthier and longer for individuals and for society. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.